Hello, people. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning from wherever you are in Kenya and abroad. It's yet another moment for us to discuss, as usual, our topic on economics and politics. But I want to make something very clear that I am not discussing politics, in the body of politics. No, I'll be talking about politics because when you focus on economics cannot work without politics. So I will not discuss politicians here. I will not discuss a name of a politician. That one I will not do. But I will just be talking about policy. How politicians should develop economic policy that then will lead to an economic growth and development. So let not be lost to us that I am not talking about politics. I am a commentator on politics because of policy, not because of the practice of politicians and the conduct of politicians. No. So that should be made very clear. Now, I have changed my channel from the perspective to the corporate perspective because I realize that there are many channels under the name The Perspective, and because I want to take people to the corporate world, I'll be talking about financial matters. I thought it is important then that everything that I speak about, it will be in the corporate perspective. The corporate is about the private sector and government institutions. That is what I want to deal with. And because we all know that it is the politicians then who make the decisions, who make the policies, that is why we have to incorporate that so that the common man understands their role in governance. As we move together, I will be also discussing about issues that leads to, election of better leaders, just to carry some duty of civic education, because I think that is important for us to talk about. But majorly, I am here to help us navigate through the murky waters of the corporate world, and how then we can manage our country as a corporate and be able to make, advances in terms of our economic growth, per capita income, and GDP. I'll be simplifying these terms as as simple as possible because I want everyone to learn, and we have to be moving, in the same line. So I want all the wananchi to really move with me here. Even sometimes I'll be speaking in Swahili, just so that my message can be, gotten by the very person I am, targeting. All right. So today I want to expand a bit on the reason why I think we should change our perspective on taxation. Those who've done public finance and economics in general know that the number one source of government revenue is taxation, and that's a practice across the world. But then, because it is a practice that has been done for many years, from where I sit, and I say this is my very personal, crazy opinion, because after studying economics, I cannot just sit. I have to think, because economics is about the answer. We probe, and then we try to provide answers. We try to explain a bit why, in an economics perspective, it is the way it is. All right? So economics is not an end, it is a process. And a correct answer, economically speaking, today may not be correct, in another 50 years, because demographics, because the way we exploit natural resources, keeps on changing. So then, I want to really be heard very clear by powers that be and the policymakers that we have to look into our tax regimes. What is the practice of taxation in our country? Because then it is how we tax our people that could either spur or delay economic growth. So my opinion is that government should not tax its employees. And if they do very minimal tax, we should not focus our taxation on income tax, because that is essentially not important. That is essentially a non-issue. Countries like Qatar and Bahrain do not tax salaries for their people. They don't tax. They don't tax. There is no taxation for salaried people. All right? What those countries have done, they have maximized on the utilization and exploitation of the natural resources. We all know Qatar is a very good producer of natural oil and natural gas, petroleum products. So they have really learned the skill of totally exploiting those resources to the advantage of the country and the economy at large, so that they don't really have to carry out the burden, to forward the burden to the employees of government. I don't want us to move to the Qatar way, because ideally in Qatar, everybody, whether in the private sector or in the civil service, is not taxed. But in Kenya, I propose that we don't tax government employees, because it doesn't make sense for me. And my argument is very simple. Why do you tax somebody who you pay by the end of the month? So that means what you're taxing is ideally what you use in the next month to pay them. So it doesn't make sense. It does not have any economic value, if you ask me. What the government should do, and this is what I want to insist on, the government should focus on developing and growing the private sector. We have to allow massive investments. That is my first recommendation. That we expand the private sector. We allow it to grow. And let me give you a good example from a statistical perspective. Let us assume that a company is making a profit of 10 billion. 10 billion. All right? 10 billion. That's a single company. And then in Kenya, corporate tax, for example, is only 30%, whether multinationals or domestic companies. It's 30%. So 30% of 10 billion is 3 billion. So this company will pay a corporate tax of 3 billion. Now the question is, what about if we provide a very conducive environment for business to thrive, and this company now grows its profit to 20 billion? What is that percent of 20 billion? Just that percent. Right? It is 6 billion. 6 billion. Now, we cannot sit down and ask ourselves, can we reduce the corporate tax from 30% to 25%? And they say yes. Because then if we do the same, they will find that this company now will pay a tax of 5 billion. We are intervening in criminal taxes, because the government has created an environment for growth for all companies. So when the ease of doing business has been promoted by government, because that is essentially the role of government, we have many companies which can pay taxes. Now, when these companies are growing, they are absorbing more people. All right? So in that process, we'll have more people who are coming to the private sector, then who will earn huge salaries, then who will pay huge taxes to government. Now you get my point? We have to build the private sector, so that is now where is the next stage for government to get its revenue from. Absolutely. Absolutely. So if an employee of government is paid 100,000 and the tax is 20,000, let us just give them 8,000, and that's it. And that's it. so we can plan and plan well. All right? So that is my first case. The government should provide a conducive environment for doing business. Number two, we must make government very unprofitable to work for. That is what we need to do. We cannot have a country where when people want to retire, they go look for government. Now they get government jobs because they are paid handsomely, hefty amounts of money, and they are just going to retire. We cannot be such an economy because such an economy cannot grow. We cannot do that. We are supposed to make government very unattractive to work for. So that going to work for government is essentially it should be a call. Like going there to give service to the community. That is how government should be meant to work. So the government cannot be the best employer. It cannot be. It is the private sector we should attract the best brains, not government. Then how do we grow our economy? There's something that we call diminishing marginal returns. If you have 10 people or produce 30 units of a good, then if you employ another person, now they are 11 person, they produce 31. So that means you don't have to employ that other person. So government should not have the bulk of the employees. That is very wrong. We must formalize the private sector. So that is where the big chunk of the Kenyan workers are supposed to be. And they're supposed to earn huge salaries. We should make government so unattractive and make the private sector so attractive so that people will go to work in the private sector. If you want to earn billions of shillings, you just go in the private sector. You invest in the private sector. You just invest, you become an entrepreneur. Right? By not going government so that you earn hefty amounts of money. Indeed, what we should have is people leaving government to go and work in the private sector. Not people leaving private sector to go work for government. That is not growth for me. That is not growth. So the policymakers in government must be very intentional in bringing out policies that are friendly to business environment, that encourage investors and entrepreneurs to deepen their skills and investment portfolios, to create wealth and make huge profits. Because then that means more jobs, more tax, more revenue to government. And finally, number three. The government should come up with a tax commission or a tax authority that captures the information of taxpayers. There has to be a data register. Let me, someone should tell me, why are we told to file tax returns every year? Why are we told to do that? From January to June. Why? Why should even someone be penalized for failing to file returns when their taxes have been remitted for the whole year? For example, if I've been working from January to December and my taxes always are remitted every month, why on earth would I be forced to go and, file for my returns? It doesn't make sense. our tax authority or our tax commission should ensure that data for every person who is taxable or whose salary or whose earnings are taxable is in their data. And once your tax has been remitted, that's all. They should automate those systems. That is how we streamline our tax laws and our tax practices. Of course, we cannot continue to do things the same way we have done them for many years. Filing returns is something that we should not be talking about, because then people just file nil returns. Why on earth would I go and file nil returns? For what reason? So my advice is that we have to change the way we have seen taxation. There should be a reason why government sees sense in focusing on expanding and growing the private sector, because that is where the economy grows. That is where the ground for an economic boom, lies. And developed countries understood the assignment very well. That's the secret. The West, the Europeans, the Asians, they are focused on industrialization. They are focused on production. They are focused on real growth of the economy. And the role of government is just to provide a conducive and a favorable environment and a level playing ground for all players. And that is how we prepare a recipe for economic growth. Government paying exorbitant salaries to its employees is a waste of resources. It is a waste of resources. And I know that it's a process that we must begin, so that in the next 10, 15 years, then we streamline everything. And now Kenya will have a stable economy. The reason why we struggle with wage bill as a country is because we pay a lot for government employees, whereas the private sector is paying very little, not because of the wish of the private sector, but because of a lack of a proper and a conducive and a favorable environment for doing business. That we must create. And that's how we spur economic growth. Please let me hear your opinions on the comment section. I'll be following. And you can always propose what you want to talk about next. And I'll be here to listen to all opinions and abide by your advices. Otherwise, I ask all of us to just go and hit the subscribe button. Let us watch these videos, because they make us understand what really is about economics and the role of politics in streamlining our politics and vice versa. And my name is Fidelis Musyoka. Adios. Let us push together, because this is the corporate perspective of doing things. Thank you.